Today, I am again speaking with Professor Majid Sharifi. He is the Director of International Affairs at Eastern Washington University. He is an Iranian-American, and he's also an author and a documentary filmmaker. We last spoke with Professor Sharifi shortly after Israel's surprise attack on June 13th against Iran, and we spoke with him about the fallout of that. I wanted to continue this conversation again today to follow up and see where things are at currently in Iran, politically, domestically, etc., especially given the news that the president of Iran, Pezeshkian, has signed a law or a bill that will now suspend cooperation with the IAEA. So, Professor Sharifi, thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And so, Professor, tell us, what did you make of the cessation of hostilities after 12 days? And what is your overall assessment of the 12-day war between Iran and Israel?
In some ways, three actors, uh, with the exception of Iran, because the aggressor in this attack was Israel, and and U.S. was the accomplice in this illegal aggression, and Iran had to fight back. And then, of course, by the 12th day, it was obvious that this is a lose-lose situation. Certainly for Israel, it was a losing game. For US, it seems that it was a losing game. And Iran never wanted this war to begin with. So they agreed to the ceasefire. Now, and that's where we are.
So, from your perspective, you wouldn't declare that Iran can claim victory, from your perspective?
Well, victory is a political term, and of course, it has to be defined. I believe the fact, and obviously I only can represent my own voice, and I don't necessarily say what the Iranian. I don't want to say what whoever says. From my opinion, it was in a sense Iran's victory because it wasn't a loss. Because that's the first time in history of Israel that it started a war, maybe the second time, in fact, after 2006, Beirut. But losing for Israel was, I mean, not winning was a loss. For Iran, not losing was a win. Again, we have to go back to what's the reality here. It wasn't Iran that attacked Israel. It was Israel that attacked Iran. And in that game, Israel lost because it didn't achieve any one of its objectives, stated and non-stated. Iran achieved its objective because Iran wanted to have a deterrence against Israel, and it showed it can. So, in that sense, yes, Iran won, but this is not a win that the Iranian government or the Iranian state wanted anyway. They didn't want this war. They didn't want the war, and they still don't want the war with US. Right or wrong, that's not what their position is. Their official and unofficial position is that they didn't want to escalate. So, in the sense, they defended themselves. The only country between these three participants that was actually legally and morally were fighting for self-defense. It wasn't a war of aggression. And in that sense, Iran, in a sense, also was a loser because of course, millions and billions of dollars worth of damage to the country, hundreds of people. The estimates are over 700 people that have died, and thousands of people have been injured, and over 3,800 from the statistic that I read, and it may not be accurate, it may be definitely underestimate, at least 38,000 apartment buildings with their residents are destroyed, plus other infrastructures. And this is obviously in those terms, the innocent children, we can't say a victory when innocent children and housewives and regular civilians died. No one can say this is a victory. This is a tragic, tragic defense. And it was a shame on, it should be shameful on Israel, just like everything else that it does, that they wanted to make a Gaza out of Tehran. They just lost in that game.
So when we had last spoken, you had not communicated with anyone inside of Iran. I'm sure by now you have. Can you give us a sense of what the people are thinking and feeling, at least the people you've spoken to? And obviously you don't have to divulge any like private or sensitive information, but we saw people who were critics of the government rally behind the flag because they did not appreciate being attacked by a foreign aggressor. So what is the
Well, from
situation in Iran like now?
open sources, and I don't have any contact with US or Iranian government at all. But from open sources, I can assure you that there was a unification. There was a rallying around flag. That was expected. This was unexpected for the US and Israel, especially Israel, because these people are so arrogant that they're not ignorant, obviously, but they're arrogant. Ignorant in the sense that they're not ignorant because they have so much intelligence on Iran through their technological and human intelligence. But they are so arrogant that they just cannot see reality. There is a huge gap between what they wish and what is. Obviously, Iranian government has lots of opposition, but these opposition uh, in the illusory, delusional thinking of Netanyahu and his gang was the idea of a regime change. What an absurd, thinking. So they were thinking that they're gonna attack Iran in 2, 3 days. People gonna just because of their opposition, not even political opposition, sometimes economic deprivation, which has been caused by U.S. sanction, 40 years sanction, those dissatisfaction, they're gonna just because of that, people gonna just rise up and stand with the murderers of Gaza, with the warmongers, with the people that are dropping bombs on them. This is delusional. And of course, this delusion, the source of this delusional thinking, which has been going on in VOA, Voice of America, or BBC, or International, Iran International, another TV sponsored by definitely partly sponsored by Israel and all the rest, and hundreds of other TV channels and radio stations. They say things out of their arrogance without having any grasp of reality of the Iranian society or any nuances. And then they believe their own lies. And this is because of their arrogance. Their arrogance blinds them. It's so much hubris, thinking that they could make a regime change by dropping bomb on people. so, so in that sense, reality hit. Of course, not really through the U.S. media. U.S. media still declares victory. Israelis declare victory. I don't know based on what, but they were defeated in that sense of wanting to change the regime or to make the regime to submit, and in that primary objective they lost. We got to remember that the nuclear threat is I don't want is a hogwash. It's BS. It has never been there. It may be there in the future, but it has never been there. And Israel declares existential threat from Iran. Iran is not an existential threat to Israel. Has never been actually. But again, we're talking about the imperial hubris of the United States, and of course the arrogant ignorance of, I can't say ignorance, but the arrogance, hogwash and delusional thinking of the Israeli gangs.
If we can speak critically now about Iran, their response, their preparation for defense, I understand maybe that you're not too focused on the military technical capabilities of Israel or Iran, but I'm sure you have some level of understanding. Essentially, after October 7th, despite the fact that this was Hamas, which is a separate entity, Hamas is still part of the axis of resistance, which Iran, has supported. They support Hezbollah and Ansar Allah, obviously, and these organizations, these entities have been directly engaged in war with the state of Israel, and so you say Iran, this is a war that they didn't want, but surely they understood that this was a war they were part of, whether they liked it or not, because Israel and the United States consider them to be responsible, and they've been target number one in the region ever since the fall of Saddam Hussein. Obviously, Syria has been in the mix, but they had Syria exactly where they wanted, whether it was going to collapse or not. They had severely weakened it and destroyed it, and so Syria really was like a shell of itself even before it collapsed. And so Iran was always in the bullseye. But they sort of dropped the ball in the early days. They did bounce back and they were able to inflict severe damage on the state of Israel and establish to some extent a level of deterrence, which is why Israel wanted the ceasefire. At the same time, however, Iran has been like trying to avoid a conflict that's coming to them, whether they like it or not. And it's because of their involvement with the axis of resistance. So, what lessons do you think Iran needs to take from this recent experience, given that there was suppression of their air defenses? There were intelligence operatives working against the government by the thousands inside of Iran. What lessons do you think Iran needs to take from this experience?
Well, this is a very comprehensive question and it has so many different angles to it. But let's just delve into it little by little or issue by issue. First and foremost, you are so totally right. They dropped the ball, and I don't know why. A sort of complacency, and maybe they fell into the trap of negotiation with Steve Witkoff. And of course, no one, including myself, thought that the US would stoop that low to, in fact, negotiate with Iran at the midst of negotiation and public diplomacy and creating a sort of false hope among the Iranian people and among the elites, among the scholars. I have not seen anyone to say that they were not surprised by this aggression, sudden aggression. So in that sense, yes, they dropped the ball. Maybe they weren't ready. I'm not a military advisor or expert, and I don't know why they were not ready. All the circumstances were circumstances of war, and the rhetoric was. But I don't know who to blame, and I don't want to blame anyone. In fact, blaming is not a good thing. This was just an analysis. But I can personally say, from a cultural perspective, which they cannot apply all the time, it's just a sense that I have that the Iranian government, the Iranian state, the Iranian people are very peaceful people in general, and they're very optimistic people. In that sense, they have not learned in so many ways how to take this issue more seriously. This is one issue, so I agree with you. Another question comes up is the idea of why the axis of resistance, why Iran, again, did not take this issue more seriously. But let's just, in a sense, why they knew that Syria is going. Hezbollah was semi-defeated. Hamas is under tremendous pressure. And of course, it's not defeated, but it has been disabled for right now because of the overwhelming presence of Israeli attack on Palestinian. And it's very difficult into that to obviously operate in that 1/5 of the territory of Gaza with 20 to 30,000 militant reportedly, and they've been attacked, so they are under so much pressure. But we have to go back to say why Iran didn't take maybe the more aggressive position. First, this is only my opinion. First, I don't think Iran is playing the same game as Israel. Naturally, they're not. They don't want to play this game. So in that sense, they they're playing a long-term moral, from their own perspective, moral game of mobilizing a resistance against Israel and its ally, the United States. So this long term has been from the very beginning very obvious, very frank. Sometimes the rhetorics are a little bit disconnected from reality, but nevertheless, it shows their ambitions, their ideals. They're not realistic in that sense, or even though they're so very rational, but they are too idealistic to think that they kind of use rhetoric more than reality in a sense. But that's, you can't blame them. You can't blame the Iranian government or the Iranian state for taking this position, because many of the things that you and I know, and most people in the world know, is from the US media, US Western media. And unfortunately, a whole lot of time, we, even you and I perhaps, fall into that trap. So let me make an example to clear the point here. For years and years, every time any Western media has invoked the idea of Houthis, they say Iranian backed. When they say Hezbollah, they say the Iranian backed. When they say Hamas, they say Hamas is a proxy of Iran. When they were talking about Bashar al-Assad, they always say he was Iranian backed. And what does that mean? This Iranian backed, Iranian supported. It's so problematic when you think about that, because Hezbollah has never been a proxy or an agent of Iran. They're independent. They have their own interests and their own circumstances, their own ideology and their own fight. The same thing with Syria, the same thing with Hamas, the same thing with Houthis. And Iran has never, from the very beginning, has never wanted to lead these countries into its subservient proxies. It neither has the intention nor in practical term has practiced that. It has always gone along with the idea of an alliance in ideal, not alliance in strategy, but not necessarily in tactical thing. So that level of coordination has never been there. That level of coordination is between US and Israel, and US and its allies to a certain extent, but not between Iran and its allies. Why? Because of so many factors that we don't have the time to talk about. And certainly, given this situation, we should never fall into the trap of the US mainstream media projection or representation, in which Iran seems or is projected as the controlling actor in this axis of resistance. It has never been, it doesn't want to, and it cannot. And it's morally incorrect. Iran is not an imperial power. And I think idealistically doesn't want to be an imperial power in that sense, despite all that rhetoric of, oh, Iranians wants to recreate another Persian empire. That ideal is not there in the people, among the people, among the elites. It's not in the mind and the discourse of the public or the elites. So in that sense, we have to be very careful not to fall into the trap of the Western mainstream media, which represent Iran, pretty much sees Iran in the same game as Israel is, or UK is, or France is. We should not. Iran is not playing and should not play, in my personal opinion, should not play into that game. I just wish Iran had, and its allies had, more soft power to to present themselves in that sense. Now, the third part of your question is about the mistakes. Yes, Iran has made lots of mistakes. One of them is, of course, the rhetoric that they used from the beginning of this revolution. And sometimes they have not really paid attention to the power of words and rhetoric that they just say. I just make one example and just pass this point. For example, the rhetoric of death to America. Death to America, its history goes back to the 1930s when the Tudeh party, pro-Soviet party in Iran, Nixon came to Iran and they produced this slogan of death to America. And why did they do that? Because they didn't have a Persian direct translation of down with America or down with US. So US wasn't in the vocabulary of normal, regular, popular people. So a bunch of elites, less than seven, came up with the slogan, and it became a slogan that became popular among the people because so many people talked about it. So they don't have down. Down in English, down with US is, or down with Israel. It's not about the people. It's not about the state. It's not about the country. It's not about the culture. It's not about the history. It's not about that. It's about a regime. So what they meant down with at the time, US administration, or Israel, US Israeli government, when they say death to Israel, death to America. But this has been clear from the very beginning that it has not been understood in the lingo of the American public. Death to America means death to country. Death to Israel means death to country. And from the very beginning, they were never, because of lack of true intellectual debate in Iran, there has never been a modification of that. So they fell into this trap and they followed those slogans, and people don't really think about these things. And of course, these are mistakes. These are rhetorical mistakes that I believe if you don't have the soft power to convince most of the American people, at least a part of American people, that when you say death to America, you really don't mean the people, and they have said it hundreds of times. That's not what they mean. If you don't have that soft power, don't say it. You know, manage your own soft power, recognize your own real soft power, which is so weak. So in those sense, there have been a lot of mistake rhetorically, and there have been a lot of mistake also in tactical and strategic stuff. And so we are where we are.
You raise a lot of excellent points. I appreciate the clarification. You know, if there was ever a need for a PR rebrand, definitely the Death to America is one of those cases. When I was in Tehran, I went to the former US Embassy, which is now the Den of Spies Museum. Uh, for those who don't know, after the revolution, Iranian college students basically occupied the US Embassy and they held certain American staffers hostage. And it's produced a hostage crisis between Iran and America. And eventually that case was settled over a couple of years. But that embassy was transformed into this museum that exposed America's involvement in basically undermining Iranian interests in the country. And so they call this embassy the Den of Spies. And on the wall, they had a clarification for what death to America means. And I thought it was so funny. It's like, if death to America isn't what it means, why are you trying to explain what it does mean? You need to pick a whole new phrase. You know, it doesn't make sense. It's
It
like,
doesn't
I
make
know we're
sense.
saying it, but that's not actually what we're saying. We're saying something else. Okay, so say something else, you know, just come up with a new phrase. So I get
Thank
it.
you. Thank you so much for saying that. Exactly. And the same thing with Ahmadinejad when he was president. He wanted to say that we should not have Holocaust, question not the Holocaust, but the Holocaust, the way it's been abused and misused by Israelis. But rather than saying that, he was saying things that was beyond the reality. And then when you listen to him, you said, no, this is not what he's saying. But the slogan of a Holocaust denier stuck to him. Of course, this is a soft power disaster. And it's only the circumstances. And right now, if anyone has done any favor as far as rhetoric is concerned, is the Palestinian that has done a huge favor to Iranians. Because in their horrible death and suffering and starvation, people are realizing they're sympathizing and empathizing with the situation in Iran because Iran has been a supporter of Palestinian. It's not the other way around. It's not the rhetoric and the soft power of Iran that has really empowered Hamas. It is the soft power of the world right now, the global power of Palestinian in Gaza and the atrocity of Israelis that have empowered Iranians and the rest of the world to say that, you know what? We don't want to be Gaza. We don't want to be another Gaza. We cannot believe what Netanyahu is saying. Netanyahu said the same thing when he was attacking Beirut and killing people, and he was telling people that I am on your side. This is, again, hubris, arrogant, delusional, stupid, murderous lie that normal people in the street understand. So, in a sense, Palestinians have really, in their death and suffering, has given more to Iran and its empowerment as far as soft power is concerned, and not the other way around. And that's a mistake. That's a huge mistake on the part of the Iranian government.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I want to focus a little more on this use of soft power and the power of words because I personally I understand the significance. Obviously, I wouldn't be in media if I didn't believe in the power of information and words. At the same time though, I feel like the United States, regardless of what the truth is, regardless of what the rhetoric is, what sort of words you use, if they're out to get you, they'll create any justification to do so. And even though Iran has been using this rhetoric since the revolution of death to America, in the lead up to this, all the Republican warmongers and neocons that were trying to sell this war to the public, all over social media, they were saying, these are the people who say death to America. And still, you had Americans in the millions on social media saying, no Iranian has ever hurt me before. So, yeah, that's what they say. But even they don't believe that that's what it means, even though that's never been communicated to them directly. And that's because so many people understand at this point in time, after decades of this kind of foreign policy, that these tricks don't work anymore. People don't believe what the American media, political establishment, they don't believe what they say. They don't believe their justification. And they understand that this is just another war that really advanced Israel's interests. So I'm not saying it doesn't matter. At the same time, though, I feel like it doesn't necessarily matter as much as we think it does. What do you have to say about that?
I think it does matter because language is power and knowledge is power. For the Iranian, at the unconscious level, even those people who are fanatically pro government, pro state, when they say when they say death to America, they really don't mean American people. I know that Iranians in general, left, right, religious, irreligious, are the most pro Western population in the Middle East. You met that, you saw that. And by no means, and they are very, very, very peaceful in their culture. They're very optimistic in their culture. They're very happy, easygoing in their culture. And it's just total opposite of the Israeli culture and the Zionist culture because of history, circumstances, whatnot. So when they say death to America, In the heart, in their mind, and in their heart, they really mean down with the regime. But in America, that's not the case. In America, a whole lot of people, when they hear death to America, they don't, the same thing is not invoked in their mind. It's a very poisonous uh, sort of word to them. So soft power that does matter, and of course, you know that people like Ted Cruz and everybody else, they really abuse that. They know they are more intelligent to know that death to America doesn't mean death to Americans, but they actually invoke it all the time. They invoke it. They make it to be the very reason, the foundational reason for saying Iran is the enemy of America, not an Americans. While when you really look at it, which is absurd situation, Iran, and just like the rest of the countries in the Middle East, including Syria, Iraq, and the rest, they could be, they have no strategic conflict of interest. Iran has no strategic conflict of interest with US. None whatsoever. Israel is the cause of this problem. Iran wants to sell its oil and trade with the West, and it's got the most Western population in the country. They could trade over $200 to $300 billion a year with US. They could be pretty much have the same relationship with US as Saudi Arabia has. But they don't. Why? During the Shah's regime, in fact, US and Iran and Saudi Arabia were in the same camp. So what happened? What happened is one cause: the existence of Israel as a Zionist state, which, in my opinion, is anti-American interest, even from an imperialist point of view. Israelis' interest, our Zionist interest, and when I say Israelis, I mean its government and its regime, not necessarily, and certainly not the Jewish people. We have to just separate these concepts. You know, Israel as a state, as a regime, as a Zionist regime, as a settler colonial state, it has done more damage to US reputation and interest than any other country. So if you really want to think of a state that is true enemy of the United States, it's Israel, it's the state of Israel, not Iran. But in rhetoric, we have a different reality. Rhetorically, Iran is presented as the enemy of the state, and the Iranian, we were talking about mistakes of the state in Iran. And I want to say regime, and some people don't like it, especially Iranians, because they don't understand the difference between government, like we say administration, Trump administration, Obama administration, Pezeshkian administration or government. Regime is beyond parties. It's the elite rules with rules, norms, expectations, where the software of a state. And a state is is everything, is the whole sovereign idea of the state. So but some people in Iran especially, they think that regime is, when you apply regime to Iran, you are illegitimizing the government or the state. That's of course not my intention, and that's but we say that, for example, we say NPT regime, the regime of NPT, or the regime of UN, or the regime of that. It's beyond the partisan politics. Anyway, I deviated a little bit. I'm sorry, but my point is that yes, there has been some rhetorical soft power mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying that they should stand by the phrase. Obviously, the slogan needs to change, but I do feel that regardless of what the rhetoric is, if you're opposed to the US's interests, they'll overthrow you. And we've seen that in Iraq, we've seen that in Syria. I mean, they're actively trying to do it in Venezuela and Cuba. And to my knowledge, none of them, have this kind of phrase or slogan, but you've made the point very well. I want to end with this. If I can ask you, Iran has exited now, or they've ended cooperation with the IAEA, but they remain parties to the Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, the NPT. What do you make of this recent development? Obviously, we are aware that the director of the IAEA, I think his name is Rafael Grossi, he was collaborating very closely with the Israelis, that the organization was infiltrated by MI6 and Mossad agents, and they were essentially securing sensitive data about who the nuclear scientists were, where they lived, and certain locations in Iran. And they used that information to assassinate and destroy these targets. Nuclear scientists were killed with their entire families, including children, and the IAEA is complicit in that. So it's no surprise that Iran would exit or end the cooperation. But what are the implications of this? And is this just the beginning? Is it possible Iran will exit the NPT?
Going back to who loses, who wins, we have to remember that IAEA, along with the NPT, was a regime of non-proliferation pushed and promoted and established and institutionalized and invested by the United States and Western countries in order to diffuse or prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons. And this was a regime that Iran signed on to, has been loyal to, and so on and so forth. And the US attack on the Iranian nuclear sites, beside being illegal and tearing away UN Charter and NPT and IAEA and all of that, in fact, has damaged both the NPT regime and IAEA as an institution. It is ironic that IAEA, 17 of the 35 board members are American supporters. So there is no way, no how, has never been in the history of the IAEA that a ruling passed where America wasn't in charge of it, or a ruling passed that was against US interest. So this is IAEA is Western US institution. And it is so ironic that the Trump administration has pretty much dismantled this institution, which it has power to control the the non-proliferation treaty. So this is a huge loss on the part of US. And of course, from the Iranian perspective and other countries, pretty much, being in that now, again, mistakes of Iranians. Iranians are intelligent enough to know that they're dominant in this, the dominant role. US has a dominant role in this. But they have been playing kind of too conservatively with agreeing with the IAEA, going along with it, monitoring with the hope, with the too much of an optimistic hope that if they are good boys, in this case, US going to be softer on them and they can go along and they can have peaceful nuclear weapon. It is not. It's not. That's not the case. Now, I think the Iranian elites, as well as many people in the public and also in academia, they have understood that this is a paper tiger. IAEA has always been a paper tiger, has always been a puppet, an institution pushed by the Western and US allies, and it's the end of it. This is the end of IAEA. It acted recently, at least they were pretending, and this is the whole idea. For so long, the US was pretending to be a democracy, promoting democracy, human rights, international law. Those pretensions are out the window now. So there is no pretension. And Iranians, an Iranian regime, and other governments would be stupid to think now that IAEA is a neutral institution that can protect actually peaceful and invest in and help other countries to, in fact, produce a peaceful nuclear weapon. So, in that sense, yes, it's the end of IAEA. I think whether they are reformers, principalists, or any other part of the Iranian state, there is no way, and no how that they would accept an agency, an institution that actually played the role of a spy agency, as you said it so very well. And now, Rafael Grossi, so ridiculously, again, arrogantly, is demanding to come and check to see what the damages are. What does
Yeah.
that mean?
Well,
Why
they should
would
let him
they
come.
allow him to go and assess the damages
They
and
should let him
report it
come, and they should
publicly?
arrest him. They should arrest him on the spot and put him on trial for treason. It's not a serious suggestion, but, if he wants to come, sure, but he's complicit in serious crimes.
He is complicit. The whole institution is complicit. And now the emperor finally is naked. Somebody said that, not doing of Iranians were sticking to NPT and still sticking to NPT. And they won't. This is not sustainable. Withdrawing from IAEA pretty much means withdrawing from it. They're using it as an instrument of negotiation right now, but this is a huge loss for the world, for many, many, many people. Now, the implication of this is far beyond the simple war between Iran and US and the conflict, far beyond. Many countries are saying, and Iranians are saying, if we had nuclear weapon, we wouldn't be attacked. How horrible that is.
Well, it's definitely dangerous for the proliferation of nuclear weapons. And this is something that's been brewing for a long time. Not to open another discussion, but Trump and his first administration pulled out of a specific treaty with the Russians to expand an arsenal of nuclear weapons and advance certain delivery systems and things of that nature. So this has been brewing for a long time, and it's not just in the context of Iran. And it's very scary because people speak very casually now of using nuclear weapons again. Uh, After Hiroshima and Nagasaki, you would think there would never be any discussion, but obviously, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. They
No.
they talk about it like, oh, we've developed low yield tactical weapons. We have the way to control the spill of radiation, but still maximize the destruction. And so you have to imagine that one day, God forbid, these weapons will return and we'll be witnessing them in action again. So,
Unfortunately, that's the dark path that humanity is taking, of course, led by US government, both Biden and Trump. And this is an end of an era and the beginning of a dystopia that is so depressing when you think about it. That actually the use of tactical nuclear weapon is talked about right now. The norm that had been constructed that never ever will we ever use these weapons, that has kind of been out the window already.
Professor, thank you so much for being here with us today. We have to have you back on, of course. As you can tell, we're trying to develop a roster of consistent contributors who can enlighten our audience. And if you look at the comment section of our previous video with you, many people enjoyed and benefited from your perspective. So thank you for being here with us today. If you'd like to support our channel, please take a look at the description. You'll find 3 easy ways to do so. You can become a paid subscriber via our website. You can also contribute via our website, or you can become a subscriber here on YouTube. So please do consider supporting our work. Professor, thank you so much for being here, and we'll talk again.
Thank you, and I appreciate what you do, and hopefully this turned out to be okay.
Yes, hopefully. Wishing for the best, but expecting the worst.
Yes. Have a great day.
You too.
Trust nothing. No